Hello everyone, today is the last day of the year and I thought I'll give you a recap but also make sure that you solve some training positions, tactical positions and end this year well. So it's a good training exercises. All these positions are from the games that happened yesterday. From Airthings Masters, there are 8 positions in total and wherever it is black to move I have indicated. So you can consider pausing the video here. Take a moment to see what you would do in each of these positions. I'm starting with the match that made news all over yesterday. It's a match between MagnusCarlsen and DaniilDubov. And before beginning with the games, I wanted to make sure that I tell you what the format was. So the format was that they play 4 games, and if they all end in a tie, then there are 2 more blitz games, and even if that is tied, then the game goes to Armageddon. So in the match between MagnusCarlsen and DaniilDubov on day 1 of quarterfinals, they ended on a tie. So anything could happen on day 2. Let's see what happened in this game. So DaniilDubov played Catalan and he chose knight b d2 variation instead of the very popular bishop d2, which is also fine. And then he got his queen to c2, got his rook to d1. Then after c takes d5, he played knight dc4. The point is you cannot really take this because there is bishop takes b7, and giving up this bishop would mean that c6 square would be terribly weak and you would not like to do that. So he could Magnus played h6, then bishop f4 happened. So this is a very traditional way of playing against the Queen's Indian. This knight comes to e3 in some cases, and he does that. He gets his knight to e3. The critical position comes after knight c6. Now you see white is able to create a lot of threats. Now after bishop h3, knight takes h6 is a threat. So he played king h8. There were consistent threats throughout the game. I think that is the reason Magnus was in tremendous pressure. So after knight e5 again, f7 is attacked. You can't really play a move like queen e6 because there is knight takes h6 also coming. So if you take queen takes h3, there is a mate on f7. So all kinds of crazy tactics are at play. So Magnus decided to play rook takes e5 and give up the exchange. But even this doesn't really solve all of his problems. After bishop takes e5, he gets his queen to e3, threatening queen takes h6. And then in this position, after d4, he played rook takes d4. The point is after bishop takes f3, he has rook takes d7. And knight takes d7, there is rook takes c8. All very well calculated. I'm now coming to a very interesting moment where Magnus lost the threat completely. In this position after king h6, rook d7, practically speaking this position is not so easy for black to play because one move can change everything. So it's like walking on a very tight rope. In this position, take a moment to see what you would do as black. I'm going to reveal the move now. It is queen h8. Now in the game he played queen a1 check. Why was queen a1 a game-changing blunder? I'll tell you now. Queen a1 check, king g2, and now let's say if black goes queen h8, white has knight f5 check, and then king g5 there is f4. So that's I'm sorry, king g5 there is no f4, but there is rook takes b7 and then f4. So this bishop is there. So knight f5 check, g takes f5. And then there is bishop takes f5. The idea is that if you take the queen, there is rook d6 check, and after rook e6 there is rook takes e6. After queen f6 there is rook ef6, and finally there is a mate. So you might ask, okay, what is the difference? Why not give a check and then come back? Why to play queen h8 directly? Well, if you go queen h8 directly, it's the best move because white cannot repeat the same idea here. Because if you play knight f5 check, there is g takes f5, and after bishop takes f5, there is bishop takes f2 check. And then if you play king g2, there is bishop c5 preventing rook d6 check. So if you take, let's say, king takes f2, there is rook takes e2 check and then knight d4 check, which neutralizes all threats and black is heavily winning. So this was a small nuance which Magnus missed, and he went queen check and played bishop takes e3, but then that leads to a mate. So again a good moment to see what you would do as white. It's rook h7 check, yes, king g5, and now you would love to play f4 check, isn't it? But there is a bishop on b7. So DaniilDubov played rook takes b7, giving up his queen, because if he takes this, there is check followed by mate. So in the game, rook f8 happened, and then queen takes e3, and then even rook f4. Let's say there is queen takes f4 mate. If he goes king to f6, there is rook takes b6 mate. So game 1 was won by Dubov. Then in game 2, Magnus had a decent position in the opening, and then he was able to create a lot of pressure. I'm coming to a critical position after king d6. I think in this position, he should have played gf5, and then maybe played rook f3. That way he keeps an eye on h3 pawn and also targets the f5 pawn. Also the rook is behind the pass pawn to assist the pawn on c4 if necessary. But he went f3, I think, and that is where things suddenly became clear, because black is able to attack the pawn and salvage a draw. So after rook check, he got rook h2, and now if you play a move like f4 in this position, there is fg4 and then rook f2, which means this will fall. So it is rook endgame, so the tendency to end the game in a draw is like very high. So in this position, even a small move like this here, f3, makes a huge difference. So I think from a practically strong position, the game went into a draw here. So this was the moment, I think, where he went f3. So that means Dubov is still leading, and then we go on to game 3. And in game 3, the same Catalan happened, and this time he took d takes c4. And this is the more aggressive way of playing against this system, and a lot of games have already been played. And then black hangs on to this pawn, whereas white has activity of pieces. So this is quite normal. He goes h4, and the idea is that sometimes you can create more space with h5 and also use this rook. The rook could switch over to h4. This is one of the creative ideas of this system. Now let's see whether he gets this to work. He goes h4, h5, and then he gets rook h4. And now the thing about the king, why white is able to afford these kind of ideas, is because there is no immediate pawn break that can wreck white's position. So he plays king f1 and then goes king g1. Now it looks like white has castled, but this rook on f1 has magically teleported to h4. Yeah? So that's the magical side of this game, this rook on h4. And then he was able to create a lot of threats with every move that he made. For example, you see rook a7, there's a pin, and then after knight d5, let's say this is protected, but then Magnus' opponent DaniilDubov says, now what about this pawn? So he goes rook g4, and then after rook g8, he again creates a threat saying, I want to come here, what are you going to do about it? So you see in the game 1 and game 3, he was able to create consistent threats. And then for a moment he lost the thread, I think, because you see he's coming back with his pieces. And then he was eventually losing. You see he played knight c5 and got rook takes c5, dc5, knight g4, c6, queen c6, and rook c6, rook c3. But this position is winning. After queen b6, there is f2 threatened. If you play rook c8 check, there is king d7. If you take rook takes g8, there is queen takes f2. So Magnus was winning here, and that means he was about to equalize, and then there would be a fourth game. But that was not meant to be, because after rook c6, queen d8, queen c5 check, king f6, rook d6, this is the moment in which he made a blunder. He played queen e7, and then game ended, because this queen e7 also takes away the square from the king. The king feels congested. Queen a5 was one way of going ahead. For example, after queen check, you can go not king e7 here, I think, but king g5, and then if you play queen f4 check, there is king takes pawn. So game goes on, but after queen e7, there is queen check, and after king g5, queen check, there is king takes pawn. But the point is, after king g5, he went f3, attacking the pawn on attacking the knight on g4, and after f5, he took fg4, and after rook c8, you can see they played queen f4 check, and after king f6, it's a checkmate in 1 with queen takes f5. So that was the end of Magnus's chances here, because DaniilDubov had already won 2 games and the third game ended in a draw. So that meant that DaniilDubov moves through. In this position, let's say after rook d6, if you play queen f5 and then you give this check and king g5 and then you play f3, the point is there is queen e1 check. So there is no need to go f5 and all, and after king g2 there is a mate. So this was the point of playing queen a5 here and not queen e7. Queen e7 was passive, and then Danilubov won. Now moving on, let's go to So Wesley's game against MVL. So Wesley employed a different variation of the Grunfeld. So the point here is that he was able to create a lot of pressure on the queen side, and eventually So Wesley won a pawn. I'm going to that critical position where you can see for yourself after b4, bishop d5, b4, queen f5, and this moment, take a moment to see what you would do as white. Here Wesley So played rook takes 8, rook takes 8 and played b5, and this c7 pawn is lost, and then he was able to convert the game. In the next game they drew, and then the third game also ended in a quick draw, like So Wesley just repeated with bishop e3, and that meant that they were going to play 2 blitz games. So here is the Berlin, and here in Berlin also means MVL had a good position out of the opening, and he eventually converted it. So he got a nice position, you see, and this is a good training example also. Like if you want to study Berlin endgames, I think you can just set up this position and play for yourself both colors, because white has majority on the king side and black has majority on the queen side. But I would say it's difficult for black to make use of this queen side majority because the pawns are doubled. So how is black able to generate counterplay, and how is white able to create a pass pawn? I think that will be the story. So after a few moves, you see that one side was able to execute their plans, and it is the white. So white was able to create a passer here much earlier than black, and then that is how he was able to win. So MVL's win was very important, and then later in the next game, So Wesley won. So they were exchanging blows from both sides, and he went h4, and they reach a very interesting position. I will come to that. So this queen on d1 now comes to a4 very soon, and then he wants to go to h4, but that is prevented by black's e5. And now the position I was coming to is this one. In this position you can see that white's king is on e1, still not castled. White's pieces are okay, they're all developed, but they're not immediately trying to checkmate or anything. But if you see, black has 5 pawns and white has more pawns, so he is ahead in material, but we can't really say that he is better because of the situation right now, the king and the queen and then this rook. But let's see how the game progresses. He plays queen f3, and then he goes queen g3, idea queen h4, and then he goes f5, and now queen h3. So the point is, if black plays rook d5, there is a mate in 1, because the bishop covers f8 square. So with this simple idea of f5 and try to play queen h3, he has solved all his problems. For example, if you wanted to play queen h4, that was not possible because of rook h5. So Wesley So he plays f5 and blocks this path, and so after rook takes f5, now queen h3 is possible because this rook blocks the path for the queen. That was very nice, I thought, and then he was able to win. So that means there was one last game, and that was Armageddon, because they had exchanged blows in the blitz section. So it's Armageddon. In Armageddon, Wesley So was not able to win. It was a draw, and that is how MVL qualified. So it was a plain game, I felt, and then after some moves they were able to make a draw and they repeated. So that means MVL will now face Levon Aronian. I'll come to Levon Aronian's games now. Let's come Aronian versus Hikaru Nakamura, and Aronian played Aronian had won on the previous day, so it was important for Hikaru Nakamura to make a comeback. So in this game in London, I think the critical moment was after rook e1, and this pawn on e6 is under constant pressure, but black could have played bishop c4 and kept the game going. One simple idea, let's say, is knight b2, and you just go back, and then let's say if white gets this knight to d2, you can simply take bishop b3 and then even try getting c5. So this is one of the interesting ideas in the position. But Nakamura went wrong with king f7. and after king f7 there was knight c5, and then after knight c5, knight c5, queen c5, dc5. Rook a3 is coming, so he had to go rook a8, but this is strategically a much better position for Aronian, which he converted very well. Very good technique. Though he sacrificed the exchange, Nakamura was not able to hold this because white has a lot of ideas, and all his pieces, especially his pawn on d6, they're all contributing to white's advantage. And then he won this game, and then the next game was also won by Aronian. So there was this position after bishop b7, and it was important here that Nakamura wins to stay in the event, but he played a5 here, and there's a nice tactic for black. Take a moment to see what you would do as black. Okay, I'm going to reveal the move now. It's always CCTP, so knight g4 check, and then here if king goes to g2 or f1, there is knight e3. If the king goes to g1, there is rook d4, and rook e1 check. No, not even rook e1. This bishop takes f3, and then rook e1 will follow. I mean, it's such a tragic position. If you play a move like rook d1, even that will not help you because of bishop d1, knight d1, rook e1 check, king g2, rook takes d1, rook takes d1, knight e3. Wonderful tactics. It all starts with knight g4. Now fg4 is what happened in the game, but the problem is bishop takes h1, the rook is overloaded, it has to guard d1, it has to also capture h1, one of them has to be given up. So later he got an exchange and then won the game. So that meant Levin Aronian qualifies and Hikaru Nakamura was out. Then we come to Razdabov's games against Nepomniachtchi. So here Razdabov was wide in the first game. The critical position was after rook a c1. Okay, your queen is attacked. Let's assume that you are black. What would you do in this position as black? Okay, if you played queen b8 or queen d6, I think you're okay, but not queen b7. Queen b7 runs into a tactic. So again, CCTP checks, captures, threats, and it's important that you see this threat, which is queen e4, threatening the mate on h7. The point is knight f6 is not possible because of queen takes b7 and g6 drops the pawn. So that's how Razdabov got a heavy advantage in the first game. In the second game, they drew after queen g5. I think here in this game, Razdabov again had a chance. Let me go into that position after ef5, rook f5. Take a moment, let's say you are black, what would you do? It's a beautiful move and not so easy to see. It is knight e1. The point is queen g2 mate is threatened, and if you play queen takes e1, there is rook d1. So this was missed, and then later the game ended in a draw, and then they did another draw, and then the fourth game was won by Nepomniachtchi in a King's Indian. It felt like Razdabov was getting his traditional King's Indian into play and had everything set, but then later Nepomniachtchi showed great patience and he was able to neutralize all the threats. I'm very fascinated by this endgame of opposite color bishop, which I'm coming to. So this looks like black is going to hold, but it's all about principle of second weakness. Okay, so I'm coming to that position on opposite color bishops. So now it feels like, okay, there's just one weakness, which is the c7 pawn, but then there is a second weakness here, that is white has a pass pawn and black has to consistently defend. So one is c7 and the other is f6. That was enough for Aronian, for Nepomniachtchi to win the game, because he first goes with his king, and now take a moment to see what you would do. How would you convert this? It makes for a very good endgame exercise. So the point is, he gets his bishop with e2, forcing the black king out of f6. So he goes bishop e6, and now the bishop cannot go here because of the pawn, bishop cannot go here because of the pawn, and the king cannot go here because king e7. So that is how Nepomniachtchi was able to win. But then that doesn't end here. The next game, Nepomniachtchi made a comeback, and then he was able to create a lot of threats. He played this rare version of Baltic, but then because of this consistent threats, he was able to put tremendous pressure. For example, now he cannot castle here because of knight d2. So tricks like this were consistently in the air, and then he went on to win. There's a lot of pressure. So then there was one moment in which he completely finished off after rook d2, queen h4, rook b2, queen h2, and then queen g1, and then this is going. So if bishop f1 happened and then queen takes f2, king d1, there is queen d2 mate. So that meant they go into an Armageddon now. After that, actually, Razdebov won another game, and then they went into an Armageddon. And in this game, he starts with b6. The other day in the chat when I was doing Title Tuesday, someone asked how is Owen's defense, and I think this game shows how dynamic Owen's defense could be. I'm going to one critical position which I like very much here after queen f7. Nepomniachtchi played e takes d6, okay? And now take a moment to see what you would do as black. The move is very funny, and it was also part of the exercises I shared earlier. It is bishop e3. With bishop e3, there is queen f2 suddenly threatened. There is rook g2 also threatened, but rook takes e3 is a mistake because of rook g2. You see, the queen is hanging. So that was the idea, and that was what gave him the point. So that means actually here the points are equal, and now they move into the Armageddon game. So this was enough for Razdebov. I mean, that bishop e3 move, the surprise value is such that I think black deserves a win there. Then he went on to win the game, and then came the last game, which is Nepomniachtchi versus Razdebov, and Razdebov was having black pieces, and all he had to do was hold. And to hold, he actually employed King's Indian defense. And this is a line that I have played myself. That's an interesting line. And I think here, this exchange sacrifice with bishop d4, rook d4, knight d6, this was not a blunder, it was deliberate. This is what I feel. And then g5, f6. There comes a point where the game goes into the same material balance. So even until the end, they have this kind of position where black is an exchange up, but white has some compensation, but only good enough for a draw. So he just maintains the rook on the d line, and then they repeat, and then game ended in a draw. So that means with all these results, it will be DaniilDubov versus Razdebov tomorrow. I mean, that is actually today. And MVL versus Aronian. So these are the pairings for semi-finals. So I think the games will start today at 7 Indian time. You can watch them. And the more action awaits us ahead. This was, I think, one of the most exciting days for Airthings Masters, because Hikaru was out, Sovasli was out, Magnus was out. So yeah, a lot of things, and even Nepomniachtchi. Nepomniachtchi was actually part of the first, I think, Skilling Open tour also. He was there, and Wesley was also there, Nakamura was there. So overall, I think it was a fun day and a lot of interesting games. I hope you liked this recap series that I did. I'll be back with another one soon. Wishing you all a happy new year in advance. Until then, take care. Bye bye.